Earlier today, U.S. Treasury officials reportedly announced that they were refreezing the $6 billion cash transfer to Iran previously arranged as part of a Biden administration prisoner swap deal. Now, earlier this week, 20 Republican senators demanded President Biden end this cash transfer, a demand that later picked up some support from Senate Democrats. So what does this mean that the funds are refrozen? I mean, for how long? Joining me now to discuss this and more is Senator Pete Ricketts of Nebraska. He serves on 3 committees, including the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator Ricketts, welcome back to Washington Watch.
My pleasure. Thanks very much for having me on.
So Senator, we're told now that these funds have been refrozen. What does that mean? What do we know?
Well, we don't know a lot, frankly. We know that the Biden administration was trying to return the $6 billion to Iran, that it was in South Korea, that it moved to Qatar, and none of the funds have been accessed so far by Iran. What the process up until this point would have been is that they would have had to make purchases, supposed to be only humanitarian goods, and that then they would submit basically a receipt to us and we would release the funds. What I have and my Senate colleagues have asked for is that the president refreeze those and not provide them to Iran. They're the largest state sponsor of terrorism. They sponsor Hamas. The Wall Street Journal said that they were complicit in planning this horrible, brutal attack. And frankly, money can be used in a variety of different ways. Ayatollah Khamenei said that he's going to use it any way he wants. So even if they do spend money, say, on food and get this money back from Qatar, they can spend it on anything they want. They can spend it on guns. You know, if you free up money that you're going to spend on food and you can now spend it on terrorism, that could happen. So it was just a bad idea to begin with. It was cut in secret with the Biden administration. We were not made aware of it on the Foreign Relations Committee. And I'm glad that they're slowing things down here, but we got to make sure that there's a permanent freeze on this. And in fact, that we have some legislation we're working on in the Senate to be able to make that happen.
I think that last point is very important, that it be permanent, because as you pointed out, they must think the American people are pretty dumb to say that, well, they can only use it for food and humanitarian purposes. But I mean, let's say you've got a household budget of, $200, and you were going to buy $50 worth of meat, but instead somebody else gives you $50 and you go ahead and use that $50 to buy ammo. I mean, you can do whatever you want with the money. You can move the money around. But if they know this money is coming, and we've heard repeatedly from the administration that, well, they haven't accessed it yet. We know that. We're tracking it. But if they know that $6 billion is sitting in the bank, they can move on what they have today, move with what they have today, knowing that money's coming tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely right. That's why it makes no sense first of all, it made no sense to do this deal in the first place. And certainly now that Iran was cutting this deal with the Biden administration, perhaps while they were planning this attack on Israel, just shows the contempt that they have for the Biden administration and why, again, we should stop these funds from getting to Iran. They're just going to use it to, again, sponsor terrorism, and we can't allow that to happen.
Now, you serve on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, which is asking questions of the State Department regarding the Biden administration's former special envoy to Iran and whether or not he was compromised, and actually that we had a spy ring for Iran operating within the State Department. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so what has happened is the Iranians created a fake think tank and then they recruited Americans to basically staff it and then push the Iranian point of view on our State Department. In fact, some of these people actually were very close advisors of the State Department. And again, it just demonstrates the incompetence of the Biden administration that they can allow this to happen in the first place. You would think that this would raise red flags with people about how this whole process was going on. But it's just a string of failures that the Biden administration has had on a number of different fronts, and why they, in my opinion, they really don't have any credibility. And frankly, it's actions like this which is why we see dictators like Putin being emboldened. I think certainly this has also probably contributed to why Hamas picked this time to attack Israel. They view us as being weak. Anytime the United States shows weakness, we just encourage these bad actors, these dictators, these terrorist groups, to start attacking us. The world is safer when we act strongly. We need to, for example, support Israel and let them know we stand with Israel. That's the best way to keep the peace through strength.
I'm very curious about this because some of these individuals that were in this ring of supporters of Iran that were within the State Department, the Biden administration, even goes back to the Obama administration, they had security clearances. And I've been through that process when I was on the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. It's pretty difficult. It's a lengthy process to get a security clearance unless someone's cutting the corners. I'm not sure how some of these individuals were able to obtain security clearances. Is that something that your committee has looked at?
We haven't looked at that issue in particular because this has all come up fairly recently. But that's absolutely the kind of investigation we've got to have, and some of the answers we've got to have from the State Department with regard to how could this possibly have happened. If you're doing clearances, you would think that this would be clear about we're not going to allow people who have connections to Iran who are going to be compromised to get that security clearance. In fact, I think one of the individuals actually did get denied a security clearance on this. But it just goes back to what is going on in the State Department.
And of course, this goes back, it's surrounding the nuclear deal. So this should, any further or any future conversations about the Iran nuclear deal, I mean, it should be dead on arrival, given the fact of what we're seeing unfold right now in Israel. Plus, when we look at the fact that we had an Iranian spy ring within the State Department.
Yeah, absolutely. The Iranian nuclear deal was a bad deal. It never should have been done in the first place. As you know, this was started under the Obama administration. We should really end this deal permanently and look at sanctions on how we can prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon and continue to put pressure on them. For example, they're in violation of this right now, and the State Department, to my knowledge, hasn't really done anything about that. So that's one of the things my Senate colleagues and I are asking questions about is if, with Iran in apparent violation of the agreement, what is the State Department doing? And this is where we're just not getting the answers we're looking for.
A good point, because apparently these individuals who were friendly with Iran gave them a pass on a number of these things, unfreezing other funds that they sent to Iran. So I hope you guys are able to dig into this and reveal what really took place.
Yep, that's one of the things that Marco Rubio is leading us on this. But we've got a number of senators who are very interested in getting answers out of the State Department.
All right. Senator Ricketts, thanks so much for taking time to join us today. Always great to see you.
My pleasure. Thanks very much for having me on.